Uber Technology's Uber Beginner's Guide. When you open your phone and tap a button to get a ride across town, or to have dinner show up at your door, there's a very good chance Uber is the company on the other end of that tap. Today we're going to walk through what Uber actually does as a business, who pays them, who they pay, and why they've grown so much over the last 5 years. Quick reminder before we start, this is purely educational, not investment advice. Nothing here is a recommendation to buy or sell anything. So, what does Uber actually do? Uber runs the world's largest mobility and delivery platform, which is a fancy way of saying they connect people who need stuff, a ride, a meal, a grocery order, with people who can deliver that stuff. In their most recent full year, the company moved about $193 billion in gross bookings, which is the total dollar value of everything booked through their apps across more than 70 countries. The business splits into 3 pieces. The biggest is mobility. That's ride-sharing, rentals, and transit, which brought in $29.7 billion of revenue, about 57% of the total, growing 18% year over year. About 60% of those rides happen outside the United States, which is important to remember. The second piece is delivery, restaurant food, groceries, and retail items dropped at your door through Uber Eats. Delivery did $17.2 billion in revenue, around 33% of the total, and it grew 25%, the fastest pace in 4 years. The third and smallest piece is freight, which is a logistics brokerage matching truck shippers with carriers, doing about $5.1 billion in revenue and roughly 10% of the total. The way the money flows is best understood as a 3-sided system. On one side you have the suppliers, 9.4 million drivers and couriers, who are gig workers, meaning independent contractors rather than full-time employees, plus 1.2 million restaurants and merchants, 5 of the top 10 U.S. grocers, and autonomous vehicle partners like Waymo, Waabi, and Nuro. In the middle sits Uber itself, the marketplace, the matching algorithms, the maps, the pricing, the advertising platform, and the Uber One membership program, which now has 46 million subscribers. On the other side, you have the customers, 450 million people who use the platform each year and 202 million who use it every month, plus enterprise clients and freight shippers. Uber takes a cut of every transaction, which is called the take rate, 30.4% on mobility and 19% on delivery. So, who does Uber compete with, and how does it win? The report rates Uber's moat. Moat meaning competitive advantage, the thing that keeps competitors from catching up, as narrow and under pressure from artificial intelligence. So this is a more honest picture than for a chip maker or a software giant. Their main competitors today are Lyft in U.S. rides, DoorDash in U.S. delivery, and a handful of regional players abroad. The longer-term challenge is robot access from companies like Waymo, owned by Google's parent, and Tesla, who could in theory run their own ride networks and skip Uber entirely. Uber's first line of defense is what the report calls real-time physical fulfillment. They have 10 million drivers and couriers around the world, and a smart computer program by itself doesn't drive a car or carry a burrito. You still need a real person or a real vehicle in the right place at the right time. Their second line of defense is what management calls being the Marriott of autonomous vehicles. Marriott doesn't own most of its hotels, it runs the booking platform and the loyalty program. Uber wants to play the same role for self-driving cars, partnering with more than 30 autonomous vehicle companies rather than building its own fleet. Internal data shows that an autonomous vehicle on Uber's network gets about 30% more trips than one running alone. Their third line of defense is regulatory know-how and global breadth. They've worked through California's Prop 22, the UK and EU's custom rules, direct government transit partnerships, and they're number 1 in rides in most countries outside China. What are the key drivers for the business over the past 5 years? There are 3 big forces behind Uber's growth over the last 5 years. The first is sheer scale. Gross bookings went from $57 billion in 2020 to $193 billion in 2025, about 3.4 times bigger. Because the fixed costs of running the marketplace, the engineers, the maps, the data centers, grew much more slowly than the business operating margin, which is how much profit the company keeps from each dollar of sales, swung from deeply negative to positive 10.7%. They also discovered that having two products on one app helps. About 40% of users now use both Uber Mobility and Uber Eats, which is called cross-sell and means selling more than one thing to the same customer. The second driver is Uber One, the membership program that's basically Amazon Prime for rides and food. Uber One went from nothing to 50 million members, up 50% year over year, and it now accounts for more than half of all gross bookings. Members spend 3 times as much as non-members and stick around 35% better. That's called retention. The program locks in recurring demand, and on top of it, Uber has been building an advertising business that lets restaurants and brands pay to promote themselves inside the app. The third driver is international expansion. The US share of the business dropped from 49% to 46%, not because the US shrank, but because Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America grew faster, around 24 to 25% per year, versus 11% in the US. Roughly 75% of US profits actually come from cities outside the top 20, mid-sized cities where competition is thinner and where self-driving cars are least likely to arrive first. To wrap up, so that's the business in one sentence. Uber is a global three-sided marketplace that takes a cut every time a person, a meal, or a piece of freight needs to get from one place to another. As a learner, the things to keep an eye on are pretty clear. Watch how the autonomous vehicle story plays out, particularly whether companies like Waymo and Tesla choose to run their own ride networks or plug into Uber's platform. And watch whether Uber One memberships and international growth continue to compound. This was an educational walkthrough only, not investment advice. If any of this sparked your curiosity, the next step is to dig into the deeper analysis and form your own view.